Thank you, candidate Ryan Kelly. Thank you for coming tonight. He mentioned one debate. There's even a bigger and better debate that everybody in this room want to dial into. Our Oakland County Republican Party has a live debate with all 5 candidates. If you haven't heard of this, get your pencil out. July 27th, right here in Oakland County, and it's going to be simulcast. Let me back up. These TV audiences are cool, right? Channel 7 covers Southeast Michigan, Wood covers West Michigan. The Great Voice of the Great Lakes, we're going to talk about that in a second, covers most of the East Coast of the United States. So they're going to be on simulcast on the Great Voice of the Great Lakes. There'll be a debate, a gubernatorial debate, July 27th, simulcast on WJR. It is a ticketed event. I think it's a few dollars to sign up. You need to sign up this week. If you don't have information, go to the OCRP website. Yes, ma'am. It's this week is registering, so if you're interested, sign up because they're going to cut it off for a variety of reasons. So I wanted to make sure we got that plugged in for that. So one other quick announcement before we get to the debate. This is another one. The 11th District Congressional Committee is hosting conservative activist Scott Pressler. Many of you saw Scott Pressler at Battle Cry maybe 2 years ago. He is a dynamic speaker. He will be here on Saturday, July 26th for a pancake and politics breakfast. That's at 9 to noon. It's a ticketed event. It'll be held at the White Lake VFW Pavilion. So he's going to be here to sort of whip up enthusiasm for the primary and for the general. But if you haven't seen Scott Pressler, he will fire you up. He's a great speaker. If you need more information, see Amber Harris. Everybody knows Amber. She's selling tickets. She's got her hand in the air right there. She'll give you information, or else go to Eventbrite or talk to anybody in the 11th district. Tickets are also available at the door. Okay, the main event is now up, ladies and gentlemen. So we're going to get to in a second. We'll ask a series of questions on various topics, so personal, domestic policy, and international policy. So there's sort of 3 buckets. Each candidate will get 90 seconds to answer their specific question. Each candidate will not necessarily be asked the same question. Sometimes they will, sometimes they won't. So they may get the same question, they may get different questions. If in their statement, one candidate mentions the other candidate's name, like says they like their mother or whatever, then the candidate that was spoken about gets 30 seconds to rebut the comment. Those are sort of the ground rules. We're very happy tonight to have with us, as to moderate the debate. One other housekeeping, the timekeepers are our very own Janet and Robert Matsura, right here in front. Those who don't know, Janet is a Waterford Township Commissioner, and she and Robert are both precinct delegates, and they're the official timekeepers. They have small caliber. No, they don't have small caliber or anything. But they're gonna end. If there's any debate about time, see them. Our moderator tonight is someone who I'm sure this room knows, Tom Jordan, who, with Kevin Dietz, hosts every day All Talk Radio on the Great Voice of the Great Lakes, WJR. So I listen to him every day. I think it's great. I'm glad Tom is here. He's going to be our moderator. So without further ado, here's Tom Jordan of All Talk every day. Thank you, Bill.
You guys are fired up. Wow. Are you all in the 11th district? The new 11th district? No, not everybody. But you're still curious about this debate. The candidates here, I think that's good. And I'm excited to be part of this. Kevin Dietz and myself, we've interviewed both these candidates on the air, WJR. We've also interviewed that guy, Ryan Kelly, wherever you went. So this will be a fun interview. Both of these are very intriguing. You guys are going to get along, right? Are you going to go at it a little bit? We'll see. We'll find out what happens here. So we did flip the coin, and I believe Matthew DenOtter won the flip the coin. I'm going to start off with opening statements, and we will begin with you.
Thank you. So most of you know me because we've been running for 12 months. My name is Matthew DenOtter. You know, I've been in healthcare for 21 years. You know, I've been in real estate for 5 at the same time, and I own my own business. I have my wife, Lisa, who I love dearly. For 10 years, we've been together. We have a daughter, Violet, who's 6 years old, and we love her dearly, too, as well. But there's things about me that you don't know. What you don't know is that I grew up in an 800 square foot home. I grew up in a poor family, and everything I learned from my father was that you had to work for everything you earned to earn the American dream. So I'm proud of that, because that's what we've done. And more importantly, I've had to face adversity my entire life. Most of you don't know that I was 5'3" when I was in high school, so I got picked on by everybody. So I'm used to the attacks. So it builds character. It makes you stronger. It makes you more relatable to everybody. And that's what is important about this race, is relatability. Can you relate and get the votes from the orphan voters? Can you relate to get the voters out of Ferndale, Pontiac? And that's what we have goals to do. Our whole entire plan is built on win where we can win and steal votes where we can steal votes. And that's our goal. So why I'm running, that's a big question, right? Well, the big deal, I think, is that freedom and liberty shouldn't be a question. It should be an expectation. It should be something that we know we can get. And that's when I go to Congress to represent you, that's my full intention, is that we are going to fight for everyone in this room, and we're going to give you a voice. And that's why we're fighting for the voices of the unheard. We are fighting for you, and we're going to do that every day. So as far as my character, I faced adversity, but I've overcome it, and now we're moving forward. And here's what I have to tell you, is that we have the exclusive endorsement to Citizens for Traditional Values, because I am the most pro-life candidate on the ballot. I'm also pro-Second Amendment. I know that our right to be not infringed by our Second Amendment is our right to bear arms. Thank you so much, and we'll talk about
Ambrose.
Thanks so much, Tom. And I want to thank the Lakes Area Tea Party for organizing this great event. And I want to thank everybody here for caring enough about the issues and caring enough about the candidates to dedicate 2 hours of your life to come over here this evening. That was really wonderful of you. I also want to give a special thanks to two good friends, Josh Bitterman and Gabi Grossbart. Sport is very sweet. And when they decided to leave the race, they were kind enough to endorse me, and I just want to tell them how much that means to me and how much I appreciate it. So I served as a U.S. Army officer, both overseas and at home, with some time in the reserves along the southern border. My wife was district attorney for 15 years, and she was a specialist in prosecuting DNA cases, cold cases. We both have felt a call to public service. And the breaking point for us was the pandemic and the restrictions that we all suffered through, especially our children. Ann and I have 3 kids, one of whom is autistic. About 7 months into the pandemic, long after we knew that children were not spreading the disease to teachers, I came home and saw Patrick lying on our hardwood kitchen floor doing sit-ups in front of a laptop computer for his ridiculous Zoom PE class. I saw that and thought, this is the dumbest thing I've ever seen, but we had no power to stop it. That's the point that I decided I need to do whatever I can to make sure that governors and executives from every level of government no longer circumvents the legislature. The legislature plays the proper role and creates law and creates these regulations. So after serving in the military and after a 24-year career in finance and banking, I think I have the best resume, the best experience in order to address the critical issues of the day. And I hope I can earn your vote. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. Now we're going to break up the questioning into 3 different categories. Some of it you spoke about in your opening statements, but they'll be personal. That's the first category we're going to go through. The second is going to be domestic policy. And then the third category would be foreign policy. So we'll do that in 3 different segments. With this first segment, each one of you is going to be asked the same question. You'll get 90 seconds to respond. And again, as Bill had mentioned, if you mention the other guy's name, then you get a 30-second rebuttal as well. So again, this is the personal segment, your personal life, who you are. And we'll start off the questioning with first, number 1. We'll start with Mark Ambrose. Tell us about where you grew up, where you went to high school, where you went to college, and what you have done as a career.
So I grew up in Bluefield Township, went to Brother Rice High School. After high school, I received a nomination appointment to the U.S. Military Academy at West Point. Following that, I served as a tank officer. Some of the assignments that I was in Korea, I was in Germany for a short period, spent some time at Fort Knox. Then I went back to school and attended graduate school at Columbia University in New York, where I received an MBA in finance. I also received a Master of International Affairs in Russia and the post-Soviet states, somewhat applicable to some of the things that are going on today. After that, I started a career in banking. So I've been working in banking now for about 24 years, so I have a pretty deep background in economics. And also received something called, I also received a CFA, which is a Chartered Financial Analyst. It's a 3-year exam that gives it a deep background in finance, economics. So when we talk about inflation, I know what the causes are, I know how we're going to fix it. It won't be easy, but we can do it.
Well, I grew up in Grand Rapids, Michigan. I've lived in Southeast Michigan for 21 years. I've lived in Troy. I've lived in Birmingham. I've lived in Farmington. Now I live in Highland. So I went to school at Forest Hill Central. It was a good school. And then most importantly, I went to Calvin, and then college down on the west side of the state. And I went to Calvin Seminary. So I know a little bit about servant leadership and the importance of bringing biblical principles back to this country. There's 3 ways to get God back into the systems. This is the core issue with our problems. All this wokeness stems from this. That's why you have gender confusion. That's why you have kids not knowing if they're a boy or a girl. Because the foundation has been corrupted and God has been removed from the systems. No longer do they think they've been created. They've been indoctrinated with ideology that says they have no purpose, no reason, or no meaning to believe. So what we want to do is bring God back into the systems. I've also been in sales my whole life, so why is that important to all of you? Because I've been successful in sales. I won President's Circle 7 times. For you that don't know, that means you're in the top 10% of your company. But what that means is that I'm a fighter, I don't take no for an answer, and I don't settle, and I'm persistent. And that's what you need in DC. You need a loud voice. You need a voice that's not just going to win and be a come along, go along politician. You're going to get a politician that wants to fight for you every day. My family, Lisa, I've been with for 10 years. I love her dearly. We've had an awesome relationship, and I want to point this out because this is very important. You're getting a 2-for-1 with her and I. She has literally been on the campaign trail every day, knocking 100 doors. She takes care of our daughter, and she takes care of our 2 dogs. So we have a Doberman and a Weimaraner, so they're a lot of work, but she does everything. And she's totally vested in this campaign. She also works for the VA. So we've been helping veterans on the trail with their benefits. Because oftentimes, veterans are actually left without knowing where to go. But what we have done is help them. And that's what we're going to do with everyone in this district, is we're going to provide that opportunity. If they need direction, we're going to show transparency, and we're going to show them where to go so they can get the help they need.
Definitely married above my station. Ann and I have been married now for 18 years. We met when she was trying there was a terrible homicide case that she was working on. And I remember being just so incredibly impressed with her sense of fighting for justice and always wanting to do what's right and help people who've been victims of crime. It was something that I fell in love with immediately. So we've been lucky enough to have 3 children, 2 boys, they're 16 and 15. I mentioned Patrick earlier. They both go to public school. And my daughter Genevieve is in 8th grade. So we were blessed with 3 children. My family lives all throughout the area in Bloomfield Township, Royal Oak, some of these spots. We've lived on the West Coast for a period and decided we wanted to be here where the values seem to align with ours much better, and where we're surrounded by cousins and aunts and uncles for our kids to grow up with. So something that's very important to us, and it's the best decision we ever made. We really love this area.
Where are your kids going to school?
They go to Seaholm High School.
And how about Kingswood? Your daughter is at Kingswood.
So you knew that already? Yes, my daughter goes to Kingswood, that's correct. Yeah, thank you.
Actually, this is our follow-up question. Question number 3 in this category.
Yeah.
What have you done in recent times to promote your conservative values in your life and your public service?
So I would say the best example, I would say the best example is I participate in.
1 second, I'm going to ask you to put your microphone a little closer to your mouth so we can hear you in the back.
Oh, sorry.
Thank
So
you.
sorry about that. So, as I mentioned earlier, I have a son with autism, and I'm a board member for an organization called Homes for Autism. That provides housing for adults who are autistic and wouldn't have any other place to go. Right? These social service agencies help take care of them, but they don't have housing in many cases. So that's something that truly wanting to serve a community of special needs, a community that's often overlooked, is the way that I've really tried to live my values. We are parishioners at a church in Birmingham, and I've been going there ever since we moved back to Michigan back in 2009. And I think that represents just living a good life with our family and our children, raising our kids. We wanted to make sure that Anne was able to fully dedicate her time to the children while I was able to continue the career. So we wanted to make sure we did that for the family broadly.
All right, thank you, Mark Ambrose. I will ask the same question. What have you done in the past to support conservative principles?
Well, I love this question because I believe in leading with your works, not your words. And that's what I can say to you, is that over the last 4 dinners for pro-life, for the right to life, we've sponsored those dinners. In the last 2, we were the #1 sponsor in White Lake, and we actually had them raise the most money they've ever raised, over $10,000, because we turned out 30 volunteers to help raise $4,000 of that 10. This is all while we've been running. 12 months on the road. My wife and I have been serving, she's been active, and I've been active in parent groups. And we've been fighting for the teachers, we've been fighting against the teacher unions. And we've been actually against the CRT, which is going on, because I'm sick of the world doing that stuff. This has to stop. And that's really going to be a focus too as well, because we know that these kids need a reason and a purpose. And that's where we're going to focus on trade, manufacturing independence. We're going to focus on fuel independence. We're going to return our economy and make this an arsenal of defense, just like it was in World War II, but not as a defense, but as a manufacturing hub. We want to make this the gem in the district, the gem for the state, but the gem for the country. And we're going to do that by the supply chain. I have companies moving in that are going to create jobs, and we're going to move this country forward, and we're going to attack inflation. Thank you.
So that concludes, you guys feel like you kind of know who these guys are, you got to get a gist. Okay, that's the personal aspect of it. Now I'm going to get into some of the things you touched on, will be the domestic policy. So we'll go through a little bit of that right now. A reminder, each candidate gets 90 seconds for an answer to each one of these questions, and you will each respond in this section to each of these questions. We will start off, who did we start off with last time? My wife is normally the one to sit next to me when I do these, and she always said, no, wrong one. All right, we started off, just the honor system here, you guys did it? All right, okay, all right, Matthew DenOtter, we're going to ask you this first question. When you are a freshman congressman, you will be assigned a mentor. If you could pick your mentor, who would it be and why?
And I'll tell you who I'm going to choose, I already know. His name's Jack Burkman. He's Congressman Burkman in M1. He's a 3-star lieutenant general. He's actually the highest serving combat veteran in Congress. He's one of the most respected men in Congress. And he actually endorsed me, and he actually pushed me to run. I met with him 10 months ago. And we met at the DAC, and he said that it was with the recruitment committee. And they were saying, I said, I don't want to do this right now. I want to wait till I retire 10 years down the road. He said, but right now is when you're going to win. So I said, you know what, you're right. The red wave's coming, and I saw the opportunity. I saw the opportunity that we could have change and real leadership, which has been lacking. We need leadership, and that's what we're going to do. We're going to stop running in silos, okay? Our state and local need to be all condensed to one mission, where we align all our grassroots, like Marion Sheridan's group with the Tea Party, like you guys, with Matt Marco, with Melissa Williams, with Fritz. What we're going to do is get everybody together so that we can all catch the wave together, because what's really important is also our state elections. We need to beat Governor Whitmer. We need to get Nessel out of here. And that's what you need, is real leadership from a federal level that can help unite our party and make sure that happens.
Now we go to Mark Ambrose, who asked the same question. When you are a freshman congressman, you will be assigned a mentor. If you could pick your mentor, why, or who would it be and why?
If I had my pick, I would choose Jim Jordan of Ohio. The thing I admire most about Jim is that he wades through the swamp, doesn't put up with any of the misdirection that's being thrown at him by the Democratic Party, and he holds people accountable. If you want to see one thing that is resounding through the entire Biden administration, there's no accountability. We lost 13 Marines in Afghanistan in that bungled evacuation. General Milley still has his job. General Austin still has his job. Secretary Blinken still has his job. We don't have baby formula on the shelves. Has anyone from the FDA been fired for this? Absolutely not. We have 9.1% inflation. Does Janet Yellen still have her job? Absolutely. There are no consequences and no accountability. I promise you that I will be like Jim Jordan on every single committee I sit on. I will demand accountability and demand that somebody lose their job. Give a chance to somebody else to do things right.
Next question. Obviously, we have a crisis at the U.S.-Mexico border. I think last month we had more than 200,000 illegally come across the border. And the larger issue here, what is your position on birthright citizenship, and what, if anything, would you do as a representative regarding this issue?
Many people don't know what this is, so I'll give you a quick story. There's something called birth tourism. An article in the Los Angeles Times a few years ago described a section of Los Angeles called Koreatown. There are rows of homes in Koreatown that serve the only purpose are to give a bed to expectant mothers flying over from East Asia to have their children in the United States who will automatically be a citizen, and then serve as an anchor for the rest of the family to establish residency and citizenship. So I want to mention one thing. I am the only candidate in this race who's received the highest rating from Numbers USA, which is the largest conservative group for immigration reform. More than 1 in 4 candidates. So in order to change it, that's a tough road. I won't say it, minimize it, make sure it sound like it's easy. The 14th Amendment guarantees that anybody born on U.S. soil will automatically have U.S. citizenship. That needs to be reformed. But we would need to get 2/3 in both the House and the Senate. It would then have to go back to the states, and 75% of states would have to ratify it. I'm fully supportive, but I understand how hard that task will be.
Yes.
What is your position on birthright citizenship, and what, if anything, would you do as a representative regarding this issue?
Well, I'm going to agree with Mark on that because I agree with what he said. But I'm going to further it. So what I want to do is that I want to actually make the way that the immigrants are coming into our country the right way. We've got to make it so that the right way to come in is better and easier than the wrong way. Okay? This is why we're having a problem with all the fentanyl that's coming over, with the overdoses. How many of you in here know somebody that overdosed with fentanyl? Several. This is a problem. We also have a huge issue with human trafficking. This is uncalled for because children are getting hurt, and I will not stand for that. Children getting hurt, that's just drops the line with me, because that's where I'm so pro-life that any kid should never left me behind. But just like you said, the challenge, the road ahead would be very difficult, but it's something that I'm willing to take on as well. And I think that we can do it, and we have to work with our state leaders again. We have to work with people that endorse me, like Senator Runstead, like State Representative Mike Harris. These are all elected officials that endorse me, because they know that I'm the best candidate to defeat Haley Stevens and Andy Levin.
Andy DenOtter, what I have to say right there. The follow-up question, or the additional question on top of that, has to do with election integrity. It's a top issue for many voters. What do you think can be done to restore confidence in our elections?
I mean, there's no way around it. It's definitely got to be checked out. We have to look at what happened. It was like a perfect storm if you think about it. You had COVID, you had ballot harvesting, you had mailed out ballots, all these things that were out of all of our control, right? And then what happened? We had corruption. And so what we have to do is find out where. We've got to do audits. We have to look. We will. It's something that I want to investigate because we have to correct that before we can count on it. But what I can tell you from experience, from talking to the voters right now, the motivation for the cheat is not there. Everybody is looking at the fuel costs. They're looking at inflation, the supply chain crisis. And I've talked to Democrats. There's tons of orphan voters that don't like Haley Stevens or Andy Levin. There's moderates. And let me tell you, this district was cut with 27% independents. There's a huge swing in it. This seat is very winnable. Most people don't know that because the media has convinced you that it's a D17 when in fact it was a D7. What that means is based on 2020's election with Joe Biden. And if that were to happen, that's the percentage that you have to overcome. Well, according to current polls, we're in margin. We're actually winning right now in the general election. So the wave is here. It's how do we capitalize on that? And how are we going to win? Is that we're going to fight hard, we're going to get votes everywhere. But we're going to hit the core issues on the economy, inflation, and the supply chain.
Well, ask the same question. Election integrity is a top issue for many voters. What do you think can be done to restore confidence in our elections?
It is a fact that governors across this country issued executive orders and judges issued rulings that changed voting rules. They circumvented the legislature, and they used COVID as an excuse for doing that. This raised concerns rightly with many voters. This was not done properly. It raised concerns with Justice Alito. What we absolutely need to do is I 100% support Secure My Vote, which is a reasonable set of rules that is going to establish integrity through requiring voter ID, requiring absentee voting that is actually regulated and monitored, and this no excuse absentee voting needs to go away.
Yeah.
And this is a brief answer, but the other thing that I would support is a forensic audit of the 2020 election.
Stay right there. We're going to ask you another question here. This is regarding the, excuse me, the 11th district itself. This was touched on briefly. Many are questioning whether or not the 11th district will be competitive in the general election. How do you intend to beat Haley Stevens or Andy
I
Levin?
intend to bring up their voting record and their statements. So if any of you watched the debate that Stevens and Levin did on May 24th over at Oakland University, it's fascinating. Haley Stevens was asked, what are the causes of inflation? She said, oh, it's price gouging business owners. Certainly not her failures, certainly not her vote for a $1.9 trillion spending package after the economy was already growing at 6%. Andy Levin then decided that his greatest accomplishment was that he has put forward a bill that is going to create a national day to celebrate our abortion providers. At the same time that he's describing this, he wouldn't say the word woman. It was birthing people. It was pregnant people. This thing. It's absolutely crazy. The other thing that they were doing in this debate is they were arguing as to who came up with the idea first about packing the Supreme Court. They want to destroy that branch of government by packing the Supreme Court. Absolutely ridiculous. I would bring that up relentlessly. I'd bring up their voting records. I don't know if I'll have a chance to talk about another point, so I just want to mention it briefly now. Andy Levin supported a bill called the New Way Forward. He's actually a co-sponsor of this bill. What that bill did is it forbid the United States to deport an illegal immigrant after they finished a prison sentence for rape, child molestation, and a number of forms of manslaughter. You're also going to have to re-import those people that we had deported for those offenses over the last 20 years.
As we did not ask the same question, many are questioning whether or not the 11th district will be competitive in the general election. How do you intend to beat Haley Stevens or Andy Levin?
Well, I'm going to hold him accountable for the fuel costs, the supply chain crisis, because Andy Levin has taken a position on this, where it will affect most of you or some of you in this room, where he wants to get rid of your ability to 1099. Okay? There's a bill out of California called AB5. You might have heard of it. It's actually happening right now. In California, it's closing the ports because the truckers aren't running. We're going to have a massive supply chain problem. With this, we can hold that against him because he took a position on it. And we've actually motivated the trucking industry to support me. And this is how we're going to win the general election. Because I've actually secured with Knit League, TIA, which is 1,900 trucking companies. Knit League is our shippers and our rails. Okay? So these guys are the ones that bring you all your stuff. They bring you your food. Do you realize that 100% of your produce comes from independent operators? All your food. So these are your essentials. What do you think people vote by? Their pocketbook. So you have inflation, you have supply chain issues, we're going to hold them to it. Gas prices, they're saying, could be up to $7. That's crazy. Do you realize what it's going to do? And the reason for that is because diesel refineries have been shut down after COVID. Only 14% of them are operational right now. We need to get them back up and running. That's how we can start to lower diesel costs. Because they're almost $6 a gallon. And guess what Biden's doing? He's going and selling our fuel to China, and he's actually buying from Venezuela, which is 3 times dirtier than our own fuel. It costs 3 times more to refine.
As Congress grapples with the issues of supporting the Second Amendment versus more gun controls pushed by advocates, what tangible things can we do to reduce crime while still upholding our right to bear arms?
100% for the Second Amendment. And I do realize that the whole thing is that our Second Amendment is very clear. Our rights shall not be infringed, okay? For any reason. I don't care. But safety, how do we get that? It's through the police. And here's our real crisis right now with safety. Is if you talk to any of our police officers, which I have, is they're having benefits taken away from them, they're having their pensions taken away, they're having their lifetime benefits taken away. These are gentlemen that have served, or women, that have served our safety, and they are now being taken away with their rights. And so what is that doing? It's stopping people from coming to be police officers. Here's the tell, and I want you to know this. I just talked to the Troy Police Department. They had 15 applicants, or 30 applicants for 15 positions, okay? 2 years ago, they had 800. Why do you think that is? It's because the woke mob has now criminalized our police force. We need to back the blue. We need to stand firm on that because our police officers need it. And that's what we need, is that we can actually help them by helping them serve us by making sure that they are not being attacked anymore. That we actually highlight the services that they're doing and how they're keeping us secure.
Thank you, DenOtter. Thank you, Mark Ambrose. I'll ask you the same question. As Congress grapples with the issues of supporting the Second Amendment versus more gun control pushed by advocates, what tangible things can we do to reduce crime while still upholding our right to bear arms?
So it is a wrong-headed and lazy argument to insist upon taking guns away from law-abiding citizens. What we need to do is enforce our existing laws. I met with Sheriff Mike Bouchard a few weeks ago, and we were talking about this NICS system, right? The National Instant Criminal Background Check. We need to fix flaws in that. So it's a crime if somebody on that list applies to buy a weapon. We only prosecute 1.5% of those crimes. That needs to stop. There are 7 million people who should be on that list as well. They are not because of flaws in the database. That needs to be corrected. And the last thing that I would say is we need to stop these progressive bail laws. So some of you may have heard of this tragedy that happened in Harper Woods just a couple of weeks ago. There was a man who beat and tortured his girlfriend in June. He paid $10,000 to be let out on bail. Within 3 days, at the beginning of July, he murdered that same girlfriend. That wasn't a gun crime specifically, but there are dozens and dozens, hundreds of cases that are similar to this, where guns are being used. We cannot allow this to happen. Criminals need to be put away, no bail.
We're in the final section of our debate, our discussion tonight. This deals with foreign policy, and we have a couple of questions here that were submitted to us. And the first 2 questions, I will ask one of you one question, you will answer that, and I'll ask the other one the second question. So you have separate questions, but related to foreign policy. The first 2 questions on foreign policy were contributed by China expert, you may have heard of him. He's a frequent Fox News contributor, Gordon Chang. Out of respect to the questioner, We're going to do as I just described. We're going to have each candidate get 3 minutes to respond to each of the next 2 questions. So 1 for each. 3 minutes. First question, China is supporting Russia's war on Ukraine. We know that. Across the board, with economic, financial, diplomatic, propaganda, and military assistance. The Biden administration keeps warning Beijing, but does nothing to stop the Chinese. What would you do to end China's assistance to Putin?
So China's been a bad actor throughout every global organization. If you remember, we admitted China into the WTO, thinking that would somehow bring them closer to democracy. It didn't work. They have manipulated the trading system, they have stolen technology, and they have not opened their markets to us. In fact, we saw an example of that just today. If you saw Jeep just ended its joint venture in China because they couldn't get a majority control in that joint venture. It was being controlled by the Chinese subsidiary. China's done the same thing with the WHO, and now they're doing the same thing by supporting Russia. They're buying Russia's oil, their dues. We need to keep sanctions on China, number 1. All of the tariffs that we have on China should not be removed, as the Biden administration is now proposing to do. We also need to extend those. Just like President Trump had wanted to do, we need to make sure TikTok does not transmit any information over to China. We need to place severe restrictions on every telecom company and hold Chinese firms accountable for what they're doing. So there's one great example that I can give you, a company out of Massachusetts called American Superconductor. That company provides critical components to wind turbines. It was highly dependent on one Chinese company called Sinowind, I believe. Sinowind stole the technology and canceled its contract with American Superconductor, almost driving them into bankruptcy. There hasn't been a consequence since that happened. We need to hold these companies accountable, not allow them to trade, and start to squeeze and sanction all of these Chinese companies until they start coming on board and making sure that they no longer ally themselves with Russia.
The question we have to DenOtter is this. The Biden administration will almost certainly lift 301 tariffs on China. Biden says his goal is to ease inflation, but his proposed move is unlikely to lower prices. Lifting the tariffs will, however, encourage companies to keep their factories and their production in China. Do you think Congress should try to get the factories back on this side of the Pacific? And if you do, what would you do in Congress to accomplish this goal?
Yes, I agree that we should keep our companies here and that they should be coming back. And as far as those tariffs, they need to remain. Biden, as in Congress, I would not be supporting any of them. And I can tell you for a fact is that the whole goal is to get companies to come back here so that we can actually do America First policies. If we're not trade focused, where we are actually manufacturing independent, where we're going to focus our kids back to trade, if we're not fuel independent, where we actually open up a pipeline, reduce restrictions on permitting, we're in trouble. And I can tell you that. This economy is in trouble because we are at war with China. And it's an economical war. It's a war that if we miscalculate things like this with tariffs, we're going to lose. Okay? Because they're hacking us, they're stealing our information. They're out there, they caused COVID. We know that. They attacked us. So what did it do? It caused a reset with the economies. So now they're not facing any hardships like we are. They're not having a supply chain crisis. We are. They're not having a problem with inflation. We are. This is what's going on. We have to hold them accountable. That's what I'm going to do when I get to office, is that we are going to look at China and we're going to make life very difficult for them in every way, because they have not done us any favors, my friends. None of them.
All right, now the next few questions we'll ask, and each candidate has 90 seconds to respond to each of these questions. With the devaluation of the dollar, many economists believe the dollar as a global standard of reserve currency is in jeopardy, which would greatly reduce American influence around the world. How would you address this issue, and what influence can you have as a congressman on this issue?
Yes, and I do agree that we are in danger. And that's what I was just saying in my previous statement. And how we can fix that is by fixing the supply chain. I do believe that. I do believe by lowering fuel costs can address that. But we have to make sure that the dollar stays strong. The worst thing that we could do is that, if they raise interest rates, right? What's going to happen if they raise interest rates over 10% to curb inflation? It's going to cause more hardship, right? So that's the last thing we want to do right now, because we're right now in a crisis. And we have to look at it and manage this correctly. And so we want to keep the dollar strong. We want to actually keep it so it's the #1 currency in the country. And how we do that is making sure that we can take care of our own home. We have to make sure that we are independent. Again, I'm going to say it, manufacturing, fuel, it's got to be our priority. And if we don't do that, I'm telling you, it doesn't matter what else happens or whatever else I do in Congress, we're going to lose. And so that's what's got to be our focus.
Mark Ambrose, I'll ask you the same question and I will repeat it. With the devaluation of the dollar, many economists believe the dollar as a global standard of reserve currency is in jeopardy, which would greatly reduce American influence around the world. How would you address this issue, and what influence can you have as a congressman on this issue?
So the value of the dollar, or any currency, is inextricably linked to the strength of the economy. So all of those things that we want to do, they're basic economic decisions about not spending frivolously, as we did over the last year and a half. Not making sure we pump as much oil as possible, lower those prices to the trickling effect of the economy, and not having a politicized Federal Reserve. That's a critical point. One temporary aberration we have right now, because of what's going on in Ukraine, is the dollar actually achieved parity with the euro in this last week. So we've strengthened in the first half of this year relative to 16 different currencies for developed economies. But what's important to note, and I get back to the point about the Federal Reserve, so our supply of money is measured by something called M2. The Federal Reserve, in large part, controls that. Over the last 2.5 years, the Federal Reserve increased the supply of money by $5 trillion, 41% increase during that period. They used a process called quantitative easing, right? Completely reckless, and now they're playing catch up. They're having to unwind that, and they're going to put us into a recession at that point. We're going to see at the end of this month a reading on GDP. If that reading is negative at that point, we are technically in a recession, 2 quarters in a row of negative reads. So,
in 1962, the United States and Russia came to the brink of nuclear war over the U.S. fears of the Russians' installation of offensive nuclear missiles in Cuba. Do you see any correlation between Russia having those same concerns if Ukraine joined NATO? And if yes, do you think Russia was justified in any way in going into Ukraine?
absolutely not. Russia is the villain here. I will say, I think that our policy leading up to this war was completely sloppy. So if you remember, President Biden lifted the sanctions on the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. That pipeline took natural gas directly from Russia to Germany, circumventing Poland and Ukraine. So no longer would those states have any influence over Russia at that point. When President Biden lifted those sanctions, it demonstrated weakness and appeasement. What do you think the message was to Vladimir Putin? Go on in. Now, I will say at this point, the conduct of this war, I agree with. The Ukrainians have fought bravely. We need to support them. But that's not a blank check. We need to make sure we monitor the material that we're putting into that country so it's not diverted and sold off in some sort of black market. We have to address the corruption that has existed in Ukraine for far too long.
DenOtter, I'll ask you this next question, the same question. In 1962, and I'll phrase it the exact same way, in 1962, the United States and Russia came to the brink of nuclear war over the U.S. fears of the Russians' installation of offensive nuclear missiles in Cuba. Do you see any correlation between Russia having those same concerns if Ukraine joins NATO? And if yes, do you think Russia was justified in any way going into Ukraine?
No, I do not. And I think that the reason that they wanted to go into Ukraine also has to deal with their lithium deposits. With all this push towards EV, it's about the dirt. That's why they don't care if they blow the place up to the ground. They because that's what they want. They want the minerals. So, and I mean, we all can see that. Okay, so EV is where the administration is currently pushing us. What's the problem if Russia all of a sudden we're dependent on Russia or China? Because those are where you're going to get the lithium from. Well, the next thing would be they'd say, well, they're going to go to solid state batteries. Well, these solid state batteries cost over $200,000. What's the cost of vehicles for you? You're not going to be able to drive anymore. It's crazy. It's nonsense. And also, they're highly explosive. But the problem is what they're not telling you. Where do they bury these batteries? Well, these batteries are buried on federal lands. The same lands that they're telling you they can't drill on, which I think is ridiculous. And we need to hold them accountable for that. But as far as Ukraine, we do need, it's not a blank check, and I agree with that, because what happens is that we need to start securing our own borders.
Yeah.
Okay? We need to take care of our own home front. Just as I said, the fentanyl, it's going like crazy, and we have to attack that. And we also have to get people to come in the right way. So let's secure our borders and make that our priority.
Final question, and then I'm going to add a few after that. So it's not the final question.
Semi-final.
Semifinals, yeah, thank you. With the increased popularity of the America First nationalism movement, how do Republicans navigate foreign affairs when faced with increased Chinese investment in foreign countries, including in the USA?
Yes, I mean, China is reducing with their investments in foreign countries. You know, as far as what we could do is we can actually do something and put sanctions on those foreign countries. I mean, that would be the answer. Because we'd have to hold those people that are aligning with China just as responsible as the negative actors of China. If they're doing something, then we're going to hold them accountable. Because we know that China is our enemy. They're not making it, they're not here to help us. They're not here to help us in any way. That's why they're hacking our data. Then they're attacking us through other ways and other means. But yeah, we want to make sure the companies that are here, we can definitely do that. I've always thought about that when this was all happening when COVID happened. I was like, why don't we take their properties that they have here? Because their investments are here. Their money is tied here. So, but there's also risks with that as well because they bought our debt. So there's where you have to manage it. So it's not as simple as it seems. But there's definitely ways that we can use sanctions again and more tariffs on them and actually make that feel the pain of the dollar is where I would strike.
Mark Ambrose will ask you the same question. With the increased popularity of the America First nationalism movement, how do Republicans navigate foreign affairs when faced with increased Chinese investment in foreign countries, including the USA?
I would say we don't need to be particularly concerned about China's investments in some of these foreign countries. If you've heard of this Belt and Road Initiative, which is what China is using to try to curry favor with a number of these emerging economies, it's backfiring right now. So it's called debt trap diplomacy. They're making it seem as though it's enticing to have loans to China, but the weight is crushing these countries. The best example you've seen in the last week is Sri Lanka. The country's in chaos, the government's imploding under the weight of debt from China. So this is backfiring on the Chinese at this point. So we don't need to be tempted into a situation like that. There are multinational bodies, such as the World Bank or the IMF, that can make loans to these people, and the U.S. participates in those. Our investment decisions need to be based solely on market forces. Anything else is an inefficient allocation of capital. And we see that again and again now. For example, domestically, the SEC is putting in place these ESG regulations that are stifling investment in all sorts of industries, particularly the oil industry right now. So they're not able to get the debt financing and the equity financing that they need for new projects to develop our own oil and make us energy independent.
Roe v. Wade was overturned by the Supreme Court of the United States. It is still, abortion is still illegal in the state of Michigan. And well, the temporary injunction effectively allows it to continue as it has for so many years in the state of Michigan. That may be overturned, but for now, effectively, it's legal in the state. Where do you stand on abortion? In Congress right now, they want to codify abortion rights into federal law. Where do you stand on abortion? Are there any exceptions in your view?
That is exactly why we need to win this seat and establish a Republican majority in Congress, to make sure that we can vote against abortion, for prohibition on abortion nationally if that comes to pass. So I'm 100% pro-life. My wife and I, when we were viewing the sonograms of our children, we knew that that was a life in there. That's an independent life. And I believe life begins at conception. So I will do everything that I possibly can to defend that view. The exception I believe in is for the health of the mother. That's the only exception that I agree with. So I think we need to defend children, and frankly, I think that we need to stop talking about pro-choice and pro-life. That was a marketing campaign that the pro-abortion movement put in place to make it sound soft. It is pro-abortion or anti-abortion. I am anti-abortion. I'm against killing babies. That's what we're saying.
DenOtter asked you the same question. See if I can remember how I asked it. But essentially, you got it, but I got to ask you it. So Michigan, the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade, which returned the decision of abortion rights back to each individual state. In Michigan, it is effectively still legal in the state, unless there's a return ruling on this Court of Claims decision to establish this temporary injunction on the Michigan 1931 law. This is not exactly how I asked it before, so but nonetheless, it is effectively still legal in Michigan to have an abortion. Congress is considering codifying abortion rights into federal law. Where do you stand on abortion, and are there any exceptions in your view?
I'm totally 100% pro-life, and as far as any exceptions, it's the life of the mother, just like the right to life. But what I want to tell you is something where this is where I can help on a federal level. And this is why I'm excited about it, because you can control the power of the purse with CMS. Because I've been in the pharmaceutical industry, I know a little bit about reimbursement. And this is important because Planned Parenthood acts like they show the ultrasound, it's in 3D or color, to the baby, to the mother. They don't. They lie. They withhold the image. What we can do is force them to show the image. And why is that important? Because 80% of the time a woman sees the image, she chooses life. She chooses life. Okay? This is an example of the MAP. And you're probably going to ask me, what's the MAP? Well, the MAP action plan. And that's what we're going to do to win this race, is we're going to follow the MAP. Because we're going to bring God back into the systems. And this is how you do it. You attack the systems, because our war is not versus flesh and blood, but against the enemy, which is in the systems. And that's how we can do it.
One final question. Who would you rather run against in the general? Andy Levin or Haley Stevens?
It's funny you say that, because I've always been picking Haley Stevens, because we started 12 months ago before the lines were even drawn. So as far as like we were focused, mission focused, it's Haley Stevens or bust. But now I'm fine with Andy Levin, because he took a position against the trucking industry. And that's how we've been successfully able to fundraise for our campaign. The truckers, the shippers, the rails hate Andy Levin because he's introduced the Levin bill. And what that will do is nationalize 85. It will take your right to 1099, where you'll be forced to W-2. It'll also pay those independent operators overtime. Why is that a problem? Because these companies run on lean margins. These margins, they can't take on these employees, so 93% of our supply chain will go out of business. That's critical. We're in a war with China. You're telling me if we take away the foundation for our economy, we're going to win? You can't. But Andy Levin has taken that position. So either one. I'd say take either one, because I like both.
Thank you. Who would you rather run against, Haley Stevens or Andy Levin?
They're both so far to the left, yet one is purporting to be some sort of a centrist. And I think that dishonesty is something that I could attack. Right? So I'd rather go against Haley Stevens. I think even though she single-handedly saved the auto industry back in 2009, I think I might bring up people like Steve Ratner or Austin Goolsbee, who I thought were handling negotiations, but apparently I was wrong. It was all Haley Stevens. So I think that she would be my pick that I'd rather go up against.
All right, thank you. Closing statements, and the gentleman who lost the towing costs Yes, to go first, Mr. Mark Ambrose.
Thank you so much. Thank you again for coming tonight. Really appreciate everybody being here, dedicating their time to hearing the issues, hearing Matt and myself speak. There's a lot at stake in this election. We have two candidates whose voting records are incredibly similar and destructive. Our economy is in complete disarray at this point because they voted for reckless spending packages. Our border is in complete disarray because they support a president who doesn't believe in preventing invasion at our southern border. Our military is in disarray because they support a president who has a social agenda and not committing to the military having the sole purpose of fighting and winning our wars. We need to change that. We need to flip this district. We need to get a majority in the House of Representatives. I believe that I have the experience and the understanding to address some of these issues in the most accurate way. And I would ask for a vote. If you have a chance, please take a look at voteambrose.com. Thank you so much.
Well, we've got a big decision to make. Oakland County does. We've got a lot on the ballot that's riding on it. What I want to tell you is that we've been running for 12 months, so we've outworked everybody. We've united our grassroots. Everybody's seen me everywhere, right? How many times have you seen us out? We've been proving it. Right? We're showing you what good leadership is. We've united with the local legislators like Jim Runstead, who's one of our great conservative senators. Who's one of the up-and-coming stars of the state Michigan legislation. He's one of our heroes. He was a police officer for 25 years. So our plan is going to be to run hard, run fast. We're going to continue what we're doing. We're going to continue to aggressively fundraise. We're going to follow the map. So I encourage you all to come and ask me what the map is after this is over, because that's what I want to share. We've got 5 points. They're going to be what it takes to win this seat. And then we're going to flip this house to the red side, because that's what's coming. This red wave, it's huge. And they're talking 80 seats, guys, in the House. 80 seats. That's a lot. 4 in the Senate. So it's short of a supermajority, which I wish we could get. I hope we get it. I'll pray for it. But that would be a veto-proof thing. So that would be amazing. But right now, it's looking like really good. It's going to be a change for the better. And it's about time, because I call it an awakening. I think we're at this point where people realize they need to bring God back into the systems, where people can see the chaos, the confusion with our youth. We can see the child abuse that's happening. We can see our children suffering. We can see the confusion and chaos in the marketplace, where we don't know what to do. So I'm hoping to get your support, earn your vote, follow the map, vote DenOtter for Congress, and I'll be there fighting Haley Stevens and Andy Levin, and I'll be representing you, the good people of this district. Thank you so much.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have 2 candidates here from which to choose. They both have materials out in the lobby in the foyer if you'd like to learn more about them, but I think they've revealed a lot about themselves, a lot about their policy and their worldview and their positions and their families. They've gotten personal, and so I appreciate the both of you for coming out here and sharing with this fine crowd as well. 2 fine candidates here. You got 2 candidates in the Democratic side of it as well. August 2nd is the primary. I want to thank you for allowing me to come here. I worked in, my career goal was to continue in the news industry since I was a little kid. And I did that for many, many years on television and radio. And I can proudly say that I quit mainstream media about 2 years ago because it is a corrupt industry. Listen, and I say this as objectively as I possibly can, but the news industry, and most of you probably are aware of this, has changed and shifted so dramatically that they're all basically analysts and pundits. So rather than lie, I got out of it, I went to WJR, got in it as a pundit and an analyst, and admit this is what I'm doing now. But I think I'd like to do it. Kevin Deese and myself, we'd invite you to listen. We're on from 9 to noon every day on WJR. And our point, one of our foundational, if you want to call it a premise, our belief is that everyone has a voice that needs to be heard. We're not going to agree with a lot of people who speak to us, but foundationally as a country, that's what we were about. We were about disagreements and arguing and figuring things out together. So we'll have people come and we'll have guests on that some of you might not like, and we might not like them either, but as an American, they have a right to express their opinion. And then we have a right now. Kevin Dietz is also a former television reporter. We're both now in a position where we can objectively look at facts and then come to our conclusions and then share those conclusions with people. And it's a very freeing thing to be able to do, because whether they want to admit it or not, these so-called journalists who now work in this industry are really not trustworthy. There's very few out there who are. So I'm just, for all of our sakes, don't watch the news. I appreciate your time. Thank you very much, and I'm sure they'll be available afterwards to talk. Thank you, Joe. Appreciate it very much. Go ahead.
What? The banking industry said with BlackRock and Vanguard that we can't trust anymore?
You said something about BlackRock and Vanguard?
Yes, look at the banking industry.
You want us to ask about that? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Well, the debate is over, but if you'd like to talk to them, absolutely. Those are two very, very important points. I'm sure they know a lot about, so feel free to ask them. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. Everybody just stay for, we got a couple wrap-up announcements. Trust me, my main job is to get people out of here. I understand that. But first of all, thanks to our videographer, Ken. Thanks to our timekeeper who kept us on. And then, how could we have done this without the half of the All Talk Show on WJR? You already put his plug in. 9 to noon, WJR. Listen to it. Tom Jordan.